Now, we were supposed to have the pleasure and honor to have Ms. Dunja Mijatović open our conference at the beginning of the day, but the demon of internet and problems with electricity cuts in Montenegro prevented Ms. Mijatović from being able to join us in the morning, but in the meantime the problems were restored. I think it's still very useful and perhaps even more interesting to include her in the discussion at this point where our discussions in substance have kicked off. And I think Susanna gave a very good pass because she mentioned her statement, and overall I don't need to introduce Dunja Mijatović to this public, at least to this audience and our audience online. I will just mention out of many important and weighty roles she has held, through which she did outstanding work on human rights matters. Her most important and weighty roles through which we look forward to her expertise today, which is those, of course, of former Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights and former representative of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, on freedom of media. Dear Ms. Mijatović, dear Dunja, is she online, Vincent? We are very happy to have you with us online. Can you please confirm that you can see us and hear us? There she is. We can see you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Okay. Dear Dunja, thank you very much for joining us, for being with us. It is a great pleasure and honor. The evil forces that want to impede quality work on combating free speech challenges have prevented us from exchanging earlier today, but we persevere and we prevail in the end. So it is a great pleasure and honor to have you intervene to our closing conference on our Freedom of Expression project. We look forward to your insight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What else can I say at the very beginning but to really sincerely apologize? It was quite unfortunate that this morning there was a huge disruption. As you can see, also behind me, the scenery. I'm on holiday. I didn't try to hide it because at the moment I do not hold any official position. But I was very happy to have the opportunity to talk about something that is so close to my heart and the work I did. So once again, apologies, and maybe this is a good sort of start of maybe new practice that you have a keynote speaker just before lunch, so you digest the words that should be remembered for the continuation of the conference in some different period. So just a try, but I know that you were expecting me this morning. Anyway, I'm really happy to be with you. I also warn you, meanwhile, when I was listening to you, there were several disruptions. So if I disappear, you will know what happened. Hopefully it will not happen. So once again, I'm just checking, do you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So when it comes to this conference and the topic, I already stated the importance of it. And I'm really grateful for the organizers, not only for inviting me, but for your really tireless efforts over the past 2 years to strengthen the backbones of European human rights protection, which is actually the implementation that you already mentioned. The topic is, I would say, the one that cuts to the core of democratic fabric of Europe and beyond today. Freedom of expression is not just another right. It is the right that enables all other rights. And it allows us to question those in power. What is more important nowadays than this right? To expose wrongdoings, to demand justice, and to imagine alternatives. So the voice that we have is the most powerful tool, as I said on so many occasions. And that is why the attempts to suppress it and to cut it is something that is so present nowadays. And yet what we see across our continent and beyond, this right is being eroded, slowly in some places, rapidly in others, hidden in some places really exposed, but also dangerously in all those places affecting the democratic environment and the societies as a whole. This gathering takes place at a time when freedom of expression, once considered a settled pillar of democracies, is under relentless attack, both overtly and also in all different ways and forms. You already stated, that I worked as the OSCE representative on freedom of the media and also as Commissioner for Human Rights. But I think it's also worth mentioning the work I did in my home country, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the Western Balkans, in the post-war and post-conflict environment, where freedom of expression actually was the right that we work on the most because of everything that is surrounded and everything that is affected in our life when freedom of expression is suppressed. In doing this work, I had the real privilege, but also a burden, I would say, honestly, of witnessing this crisis unfold up close, from the courtrooms to the front lines, from newsrooms under siege to civil society spaces being affected day by day. I have seen what happens when, courageous individuals challenge power, when they speak truth, only to be met with legal harassment, police intimidation, smear campaigns, or worse. And we have numerous examples that I'm sure you will be mentioning. But I have also seen how court judgments, the role of Commissioner for Human Rights and many other mechanisms, High Commissioner for Human Rights and other mechanisms and special procedures, when they join their forces and when they implement the work that needs to be done. And this can change the laws, it can open spaces and also protect lives, ultimately. Why implementation matters? I think it's very important for us to be very clear. Judgments of the European Court of Human Rights are more than just pieces of paper. They are instruments of democratic renewal. They clarify obligations, name injustices, and point to remedies. But they only matter if they are put into practice. These failures to implement is not merely a technical problem that we see, it is a clearly political problem. And its heart lies a more, fundamental crisis. I think I just heard even talking about the lack of knowledge and information and people not being aware what they need to do. I tend to believe this, but I also believe that this is also part of the game for not really doing what needs to be done. Because this crisis of democratic backsliding and the rise of liberalism and populism is something that is also affecting this. And the narrative, we don't know how to do it. It's too early. We are, still on the way to, democracy that is really mature and understands, what needs to be done. After so many years doing this, I simply do not buy it, to be very honest with you. The judgments of the court serve also as a legal and moral compass for all member states. They offer not only redress to victims, but blueprints for reform. reforms that are often resisted, delayed, or ignored. In my former role, I raised concerns repeatedly about the persistent gap between Strasbourg judgments and national realities. And the right to free expression is among the most violated rights in the court's case law. The implementation record that I'm sure you mentioned or you will mention during the conference is sobering. As of late 2022, over 100 leading free expression judgments remained pending implementation. And that means unresolved structural problems, uncorrected injustices, and uninformed systems that continue to violate rights. So what I observed across Europe and beyond was not merely a failure of, if I can call it, capacity. It was often a failure of political will. And in several countries, the resistance to implementing judgments on freedom of expression is not isolated. It is systemic and it is ideological. I dare to say this. Illiberal tendencies are spreading across Europe like a virus. In some places, they arrived cloaked in legality or some kind of legality, wrapped in national security rhetoric, or disguised in public morality. And in others, they march in plainly floating democratic norms with impunity. Consider the case of Turkey, where over 250 judgments concerning freedom of expression remain pending. Journalists are in prison, human rights defenders, news outlets are shut down overnight, civil society is suffocated, or look at Azerbaijan, where judicial harassment of journalists and human rights defenders has become state policy. Georgia, too, now finds itself on a path with alarming legislation and a systemic campaign against independent voices. And all this I experienced and tried together with my team, to do as much as we can, including third-party interventions that I did quite a lot, more than any other commissioner, which was probably the reason for it was a pandemic, because we had more time to work on submissions. And then, of course, the Rule 9 that I heard you mentioned, which was a new tool, at least for me as a commissioner in 2018, because we had to implement the rule and to start really dealing with it, which we did in numerous cases. And I think it's a very powerful tool, and it needs to be, really done working together with the civil society. But the problems we see in Europe and beyond is not only problem in the so-called usual suspects. In established democracies, Italy, Poland, Greece, Croatia, we see a troubling normalization of slaps. These legal actions are not about justice, they're about intimidation. Their message is clear: speak out and you will pay the price. Clear as that. And I mentioned Turkey, which I will do again, because my heart and my thoughts are really with so many friends and colleagues, many of them in prison. Failure of the international community, trying to do as much as we can, but not enough, obviously. I visited journalists imprisoned simply for doing their jobs. Great human rights defenders, academics charged with terrorism charges for signing peace petitions, and lawyers prosecuted for defending them. The implementation of Strasbourg judgments in such cases has been minimal or non-existent, not due to a lack of understanding, but because the rule of law itself is being hollowed out. In Azerbaijan, I met families of activists who were not only jailed but stripped of their dignity. And again, the court's judgments are treated as some kind of recommendations. I mean, that's too strong, rather than binding obligations. And now, tragically, Georgia, that country that I already mentioned, a country that once showed democratic promise, follow a dangerous trajectory. I visited Tbilisi in the early days of the foreign agent debate. And when I mentioned foreign agent, I can't continue my speech without mentioning the court judgments on foreign agents law in Russian Federation, which we had to wait for 13 years. And this is something, that needs to be remembered. In my address during the solemn hearing, I think it was in 2022, I mentioned this as a failure. The judgment was announced when Russian Federation was already out of the organization. And I think it played a very important role for many other examples and many other countries. Because the warning signs were clear: pressure of journalists, growing hostility towards independent media, and an increasingly liberal narrative from those in power. But sometimes, the procedures and again, political games behind are playing a very important role. But, as I said many times, and that's what was always a leading issue for me, we must not despair. There are important, hard-won victories. During my mandate, I followed, of course, the Lithuanian case closely, that you probably mentioned already. What began as a textbook example of state overreach, censoring a children's book, ended in a judgment that reaffirmed the right to freedom of expression and non-discrimination. A children's book by a lesbian author was restricted for allegedly violating public morals in the EU member state. Imagine. The court rightly found a violation of free expression, and through persistent effort, legal, political, and civil society engagement, the judgment was implemented, and the ban was lifted, and the message was clear: diversity is not a threat, it is a right. And the case of Moldova, that is already on your list, is also worth mentioning. And these successes are important, but they are fragile. They are vital reminders that change is possible when pressure is sustained and support is coordinated. In nearly every country I visited, civil society was the critical, absolutely crucial engine behind rights protection. I met investigative journalists who continued their work despite constant threats. And I'm really proud to say and honored that the contacts and the open door policy that I always had, with civil society continued, after I left the Council of Europe. So it didn't stop, people informing me, talking to me, and telling me what's going on, which is, something that I really respect and see that this is not just an official position, it's also your personal way of dealing with things that can make a change. NGOs also documented abuses no one else dared, speak of, and young lawyers who used ECtHR jurisprudence as their shield and sword, I would say. And these successes didn't happen by accident. They happened because people demanded accountability, which is really important, because lawyers, journalists, NGOs, and community leaders, which are also important in this story, refused to let judgments gather dust in government's drawers. It is civil society that actually brings judgments to life. And it is the network pressure, national and international, that gives legal victories their meaning. So the AI network has been instrumental in this regard. by equipping civil society with the tools and strategies to engage with the implementation process, it has helped turn paper victories into lived realities. What I find crucial is that this freedom of expression project was the first ever example of specific theme, violation of the convention was tackled horizontally and globally at implementation level with extremely important results. With this, it constituted an innovative, I would say, precedent that opens up the way for similar exercises and demonstrates the need for synergies at national and international level in order to try to push reforms necessary for the effective implementation of judgments forward. And I would also use this opportunity to once again express my sincere gratitude to the coordination work of the really small but very powerful and knowledgeable team and great efforts of the project partners that recognize the importance of it and their collaborators across Europe. And I hope that this final conference will serve also in a way as a springboard for even deeper, broader and bolder engagement in the future. But we also need to adapt to some new realities. Disinformation is weaponized, AI is increasingly used to manipulate and censor and attack journalists, even though the place where I reside at the moment is really far away from any AI or rapid technological advancement. But it is important to mention to really stop, dealing with these things only as a threat, but also to see what can be done in order to use it for the benefits of the society. So the lines between state and non-state actors are blurring, and the spaces for dissent are shrinking, and we know this. And in an era marked by disinformation, all these global challenges, algorithmic implication of hate, and also geopolitical manipulation of media narratives that we are witnessing on a daily basis. The terrain of freedom of expression is far more complex than even a decade ago. So increasingly, I would say the states invoke national security or public order to restrict speech. But we also must be clear that security cannot become a pretext for censorship. And the court's case law has drawn careful lines here, and it is up to civil society and international organizations to defend them. So similarly, when attacks on the press are framed as legal disputes or tax audits sometimes, when censorship is outsourced to private actors or the regulatory authorities are used as a tool, the threat becomes, more visible, but also not less dangerous because it's visible. Because sometimes, we say when it's hidden, it's more dangerous. We also have to think the other way around. So, in order to finalize, I think it's important to mention, a few more things and, threats that we are seeing. And here I would like to mention concentrated media ownership, the politicization of regulatory bodies, the erosion of independent judiciary, and all those are not isolated problems. There are symptoms of deeper democratic decline. And if there is one thing I have learned during my years as commissioner, it is this: the right to not enforce themselves. Courts cannot compel change on their own. Implementation is a political act and often a struggle. But it is also a promise made to every individual who dares to speak, who dares to question or dissent. And in the end, the strength of our democracies will not be measured by the number of laws passed, but by the freedoms preserved. And freedom of expression is where that measure really begins. So where do we go from here? I just have a few suggestions. First, we must insist again and again that implementation is not optional. It is a legal duty and a democratic necessity. When states fail to implement, they are not merely ignoring Strasbourg. They are betraying their own citizens. Second, we must continue to support and empower civil society. Third, we need allies, the Council of Europe, the EU, national human rights institutions, the media have a role to play. And finally, we must speak out loudly and clearly against the rising tide of illiberalism and populism, not just because it threatens free expression, but because it threatens the very idea of Europe as a space of democracy, dignity, and human rights. So, dear friends and dear colleagues, I know that the road is long, and I know the forces against are very powerful and very skilled. But I also know this: implementation is not just a bureaucratic exercise or a position of the official, which I never accepted. You're official, you need to work in some sort of, of course you need to follow the mandates, but you also need to stretch it in order to be successful. So it is also an act of resistance, a positive resistance, of courage, and also of hope, particularly for future generations and what we leave behind. Thank you very much.
Dear Dunja, thank you very much for this intervention. You proved in 20 brief minutes how all these matters that have fallen under your competence over the very many years that you have been serving the human rights cause and the convention system can be linked together. You offered us quotes for us to be able to rely on for 100 years of lifetime of EIN to follow. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your kind words for the work not only of EIN but of our great civil society collaborators and friends who are working in increasingly difficult circumstances and narrowing space for our activities. Your work in your positions of responsibility remains difficult to be matched. Out of the many things you achieved, one, you mentioned yourself, you placed your personal imprint into the services of the collective work at institutional and professional level, and this is something we need. It is very important through this approach to pass the message that we take things personally, and the personal way in taking things, in approaching things, can leave an institutional imprint. And it is very important that this open doors policy, as you mentioned, remains in place, but someone had to initiate that. So this is very important. One brief question on my side, and I take it on me to restrict the rights of the audience to questions because we have taken a bit of delay. I would like to ask you, dear Dunja, through your different roles, you had the responsibility but also the privilege to see, to witness the work of different systems, human rights systems, regional systems, try to tackle problems that are common to the European states and beyond. because this group of people, these friends and colleagues that are here today are also here to discuss synergies. I wanted to ask you from your perspective, where are we in terms of synergies? We concretely mentioned your role as the former Commissioner for Human Rights and also your former role at the OSCE. Are these two institutions doing everything that is possible in terms of cooperation and synergies to overcome free speech challenges? But beyond them, where do we stand in terms of synergies? How can we still develop them? How can the institutions among them bring this forward? And how can we as civil society meaningfully input to the extent that we're allowed? Because we are ready to contribute, but we're often barred from these cooperations. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I mean, this was an issue that was raised on many occasions during my different tenures. Synergies are very important, but sometimes they are impossible. Why? Because, you know, the mandates are quite different. You know, when we talk about the OSCE representative,
we have the kind of problems that we're warned about. We will wait for a few seconds to see if this will be resolved. On Dunja's end, I think it's on Dunja's end. It's the internet problem that affect her participation all morning. So let's give her a few moments to see if she can be back with us. If not, I will ask her to, if she would be willing to convey the answer to that in writing so that we can share it with you. And of course, it will be included in the conclusions in the report that we will prepare as the ending material of this conference. Dunja, could you be back online with us? This seems to not be the case, in which case I will make sure to convey to her also, once the problems are resolved, our gratitude for intervening with her words of deep expertise and wisdom, which will stay with us as we plan and shape our future work on free speech matters. And we really look forward to having impactful professionals like Dunja on our side. With this, we have taken a considerable delay, also due to the very many technical difficulties. So let's try to have a 30 minutes lunch until 2:30, and then with the help of the next panelists, we will also try to catch up on the delay. We will do our best. Let's all be back also online in 30 minutes. Thank you.